What's on your radar today, Robby?
Well, Brianna, Sam Bankman-Fried's con continues to come undone, according to a new report from the New York Times, which has finally joined the chorus of FTX critical coverage after initially downplaying a little bit, in my view, the severity and depravity of SBF's alleged financial crimes. Now, in this New York Times report, the Times is detailing SBF's desperate attempt to cling to power even as his crypto empire, which was built on a house of cards, began to fall apart. Now, in my previous radars on this subject, I've explained how SBF's generous donations to Democratic politicians, and it should be noted some Republican politicians as well, and his general funding of the media was all it seems a front to make himself seem like a good, morally upstanding, praiseworthy person. This was the businessman, the tech entrepreneur that progressives could actually get behind. He was the good guy, the white knight, the conscientious investor. Now we all know that's not true. My colleague at Reason Magazine, Zach Weissmueller, thinks that SBF built his company by winning the trust of societal elites. And Zach argues that this is actually contrary to the very ethos of crypto. Let's watch some of this recent video he produced on the subject.
Unlike blue-chip financial institutions that gain trust by being too big to fail, meaning taxpayers will provide a backstop, SBF did it in part by winning the affection of the progressive elite in a way that set him apart from the usual libertarian crypto bros. The World Economic Forum hosted him as a speaker in Davos, listing FTX as a corporate partner. Journalists fawned over him, including Fortune magazine, which asked if he was the next Warren Buffett in a cover story that evoked another infamous profile. SEC Chief Gary Gensler is accused by one Congress member of helping the company to create a regulatory monopoly. As the second largest donor to Democratic politicians in the lead-up to the 2022 midterms, SBF branded himself a new kind of capitalist, a different sort of billionaire.
The guy you see next to me is the most generous billionaire in the world.
I wanted to get rich not because I like money, but because I wanted to give that money to charity.
Zach Weissmueller, senior producer at Reason Magazine, joins us now to elaborate. Great to see you, Zach.
Great to see you, Robby. Thanks for having me.
Yes, so you are so much more knowledgeable about this space than I am, so I've really been wanting to get you on for a while now. I think a lot of people have reasonable questions about crypto in general, given what's gone on with SBF. I think it's totally fair to ask, well, is this something, was this unique to this one bad actor, or is there something really unstable about the entire system? So can you walk us through, what you're thinking is about SBF and how he might be similar or different from what has gone on in the sector writ large?
Yeah, I mean, this is in many ways a tale as old as time, even though it's got this 21st century hook of crypto. And there is a portion of this that is about crypto because FTX was issuing its own cryptocurrency that kind of helped it cook the books a little bit, allegedly. And but really the arc of what we've seen is something we've seen over and over in the world of finance and venture capital. The irony that he was using crypto is what, caught my attention and made me want to do this little video op-ed, because the fundamental notion of cryptocurrency is that you're trying to eliminate the need to trust someone like Sam Bankman-Fried. You're trying to get rid of third-party intermediaries and rely instead on open source code that can be inspected and verified. Instead of relying on kind of the reputation of a guy who ensconced himself in these elite circles to gain both investment and trust writ large.
Right, because both libertarians and leftists and everyone have had criticisms of the traditional banking or financial sector, the crash, et cetera, and then the bailing out of powerful, wealthy, elite interests. Something that drew me to crypto, it was the promise, at least, of having a system that wasn't so wrapped up in all of that, or presented itself, at least, as not being wrapped up in that, but was using this technology and was, right, you don't have to trust, this bank or something. You've got, because it's part of the way the technology works gets around that. So do you think that still holds up, and what was SBF doing differently?
Well, so the original white paper that Bitcoin was based on, the pseudonymous writer of that, Satoshi Nakamoto, wrote that what we need is an electronic payment system that's based on cryptographic proof instead of trust. And so we're still, Bitcoin is that, but there's this whole other class of cryptocurrencies, and cryptocurrency is now this broad category that could be something like Bitcoin, or it could just be kind of a scam coin. There's a lot of scams out there. And what SBF was doing was playing the kind of Elizabeth Holmes game, using his network, his charisma, an altruistic sales pitch to seduce celebrities and politicians and institutional investors, and just ingratiate himself in that network. And that is one way to establish trust. But as you were saying, as libertarians, and kind of the crypto critique of the modern finance system is that we want to get away from having to rely on those sort of networks, and rely on the kind of regulations that SBF was lobbying for in contradiction to what kind of the world of crypto wants. So, yeah.
Well, Zach, help me understand this, because wanting to get away from having to rely on the trust of individuals, these people who are pumped up by the media, people, selling apes on late night shows and doing all this kind of stuff. The reason that you would be able to not rely on something more concrete is if you have the kinds of regulations that exist to some degree in the banking industry. I would argue there needs to be more, but that provide that there has to be a certain amount of cash on hand, that you won't deposit your money in a bank and they won't go and spend it all or invest it all in a way that can cause a run on the bank type situation to happen, the likes of which happened with Sam Bankman-Fried. But it does seem as though there isn't necessarily that same embrace of having more regulation in this field. Sam Bankman-Fried obviously gave a lot of money, $40 million to liberal campaigns, while his fellow executive Ryan Salame gave $23 million to Republicans, hoping that whoever won, they would put regulations in effect that were basically lax and friendly toward him being able to continue this kind of a scheme. But how are people who are libertarian and who are kind of fans of crypto looking at this regulatory landscape? Are they hoping for more regulation? Or, what's the point of complaining about Sam Bankman-Fried if, in fact, you actually want less regulation than he was even arguing for himself?
Well, Sam Bankman-Fried wanted more regulation that favored his interests. And that is the libertarian critique of how this all plays out in the real world. Public choice theory, rent seeking, regulatory capture. That is what he was trying to do. He was trying to capture the regulators. He wanted, he was being accused of being cozy with the head of the SEC, Gary Gensler. They had acquired BlockFi, which had worked out this regulatory deal, and we're hoping to apply that to themselves and create what critics have called a regulatory moat around himself. So they are kind of the one regulated entity, and then all the competitors are kind of elbowed out. And the idea of cryptocurrency is that it's supposed to be accessible to the entire world. And the way that you build kind of trust and safety for people who are involved with it is by growing the size of the network. So the larger the network, for instance, the Bitcoin network becomes, the more difficult it becomes for any bad actor to come in and mess with it. And SBF was actually trying to set up barriers and create a whole licensing regime for this emerging sector known as DeFi, or decentralized finance. And that is why a lot of people within the cryptocurrency world were like, this guy's not one of us, because he's trying to set up, a new class of gatekeepers to the world of crypto, when we want people in, developing countries to be able to access the world of cryptocurrency and decentralized finance, because it's supposed to be something that people who can't get access to the traditional financial system can get access to.
But Zach, help me understand how those people are protected, how the size of the community, the number of people who have bought in, helps people from getting defrauded in these ways.
Well, if you're talking about something like Bitcoin specifically, the rules of Bitcoin cannot be changed. When you're dealing with an entity that, an exchange like FTX, or here in the US, we've got Coinbase and Kraken, those are centralized institutions, and they already are subject to some level of regulation. But if you just want to hold your own Bitcoin, you just can get the equivalent of a little flash drive, put it on there, learn how to do it, and nobody can do anything about it. That's called self-custody. And so that is kind of what the people who believe in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies as a means to allow new users into the financial system, that's what they believe in. It's uncensorable money that you have complete control over, and no third parties can come in and take it unless you give them your code or something like that.
And there's a sense too in which SBF's alleged fraud was sort of revealed, if I'm following how this happened, to some degree by other people in the crypto community who it was part of a competitive, cutthroat business sort of thing, what Binance did, right? But it was to reveal to the public that, this isn't worth anything, and it's been misrepresented where his funds are and how much funds he has and how much it's worth. What he paid his investors and employees with actually wasn't worth anything. That was other people in the crypto sphere trying to educate the public, even though it was certainly beneficial for their platforms. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, this first really started leaking out with an article published by CoinDesk, and then Binance went in once they were starting to run into financial trouble. Binance is the other big their big rival in this space, and were looking to acquire them or bail them out. And once they started looking into their financials, saw the problems and started the CEO started blasting it out on Twitter, and that initiated the bank run. And he also, there was some animosity there because SBF had been running and lobbying in DC and kind of, making comments about how the CEO of Binance was going to get locked out of this. So, the kind of angling to get in there and kind of capture the regulators is a big part of the story, and possibly what ultimately contributed to bring him down.
Zach, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your expertise. There's so much here we could get into. I'm sure we'll have you back. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Robby.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.